Hey everyone, my name is Dr.Jim Langley, and I'm a psychologist here at Nippenberg Patterson Langley and Associates. And more importantly, I'm a husband and father of five boys. And just like a lot of you guys, I'm dealing with the same crazy things we all are: socially distanced, working from home, and making the best of it. But as a family, we're actually really thriving. And today, I'd like to share with you some of the positive things that can be taken from this wild, unprecedented time in history. The two characters that make up the Chinese word for crisis are the characters danger plus opportunity. And you guys are getting plenty of the danger stuff shoved down your throats with the whole virus. And so today I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the opportunity that this crisis is presenting for us. So let's face it, family life is really hard. It's probably a little extra harder right now. I'm trying to work from home, and my kids are over in the other room trying to get their schoolwork done, and we're all under the same roof 24 hours a day. It's hard. It's always hard. Um, there's no training for becoming a parent. It took me 8 years to get my doctoral degree. My sister-in-law is a physician. It took her about the same amount of time to get through med school. Navy SEALs, they never stop training, right? And yet, to become a parent, no certification is needed. You don't need to go through any kind of training. Any one of us can just sign up and dive right into family and parenting life. We're just making it up as we go along. And I'm telling you, it's a lot easier to go to work than it is to be in the trenches parenting. It's a lot easier for me to go to work on Monday morning than it is to help my kids organize their chore list on Saturday mornings. It's a piece of cake. There's a lot of nights I go to bed and I think, I did a pretty good job parent or working today. I was pretty good at my job today. I can't think of the last time I went to bed and thought, wow, I was just a great parent today. That just is not something that really happens because we're dealing with constant chaos, and it's so tough. There's a million forces pulling families apart at any given moment. We've got bills to pay, diapers to change, chores to do, homework to get done, activities to drive to, careers to build. The second law of thermodynamics says that basically the whole universe is moving from a state of order to a state of chaos. And that entropy is really like so true in family life. And we have to fight against it. And it takes real intentionality. It's not going to happen on its own. The problem is that even though most of us know it, uh, we know that family life is the most important thing. It's never quite urgent enough. I'd love to talk with my wife about how we can connect with our kids better, but first we need to talk about how we're going to get taxes paid for. I'd love to have family dinners, but we just have so many activities to drive to. It's just not practical. Unfortunately, the way our brains are wired is that only urgent things kind of make it to the forefront of our priority list. And so if it doesn't feel urgent, it might not. It's so much harder for us to get it done. It's kind of like we know eating vegetables is important. We know working out is really important, but most of us have a hard time focusing on it and getting it done. So, but think about this for just a second. Who do you think is happier? A person who has rich and rewarding family life but a mediocre career, or a person who has a rich and rewarding career but just a mediocre family life? There's a lot of rich guys who commit suicide because they've realized that a life of achievement actually doesn't bring them the happiness they were searching for. But I bet you'd be hard pressed to find a happily married guy offing himself just because he got passed up for some big promotion. So it's easy for us to get our priorities flipped out of place. And this time of the COVID crisis is a chance to just kind of refocus our priorities. It's a time to reflect on that fundamental truth that I think most of us know, but we struggle to live out, which is how much better would our life be if we took this time crisis and we focused on getting our family priorities straight, if everyone did that, how much joy would we all experience as a result of this when we finally get to emerge from our caves from the social distancing thing and go back out into the world? How much happier can we be? Our our families, our marriages, our children. And so this is a chance to just reflect on some of those things, some of the priorities. Most people are taking some time now to work on things and read books that they've never had time to get to. Now's the time to dive in and really focus on what's important. So with that, what I'd like to do is just share a few points to give you something to reflect on, that when we emerge from our caves here, hopefully within a few weeks, you guys are going to have stronger, tighter knit families. And I want to start with marriage and your significant other. This might sound controversial in our egalitarian culture, but family life actually is a hierarchy. Mom and dad should be at the top of the hierarchy, and the children should be lower down. And as in our modern culture, we get that flipped on its head all the time, and it sounds sort of blasphemous to a lot of parents. I love my kids more than anything else in the world, right? I do anything for them. I die for them. Of course, all that stuff is true, but actually, putting mom and dad at the top of the hierarchy is not only best for mom and dad, it's best for children. It's best for everyone, and I'll tell you why that is. The number one thing that kids need in their life is a secure and loving environment. If a child grows up with just that and nothing else, that kid's going to be much better off than a child who literally has everything else in the world but doesn't have a secure and loving home. And intuitively, I think we all know this. But how do we make it happen? The security and love a child needs stems from the love shared between the parents. So think about this for a second. If you prioritize your relationship with your significant other, you guys are going to be inherently working better together as a family unit. How many times have you had um, some intractable argument that just takes 8 hours to solve, and then one day, magically, after maybe a nice date night and feeling connected, it takes 5 minutes to solve? Feeling connected just goes so far to it kind of multiplies it exponentially, the power the two of you has as a parenting unit. And so, as silly as it sounds, love and affection increases the more that you give it away. And so, if you are close and connected with your spouse, it's going to multiply, and that reserve is going to spill over into your children's lives. And they're going to feel so much more secure and contained and appreciated. Another part is an essential thing of childhood is teaching children the importance of boundaries. And in our culture, again, we like to take away the boundaries that our children experience. But the reality is, real life is full of boundaries. There's boundaries in everything that we do. Every single human relationship we encounter has boundaries. And so, a very important lesson that my children learn is when mom and dad go outside and have our fire and scotch every single Saturday night, no matter what, the kids know to leave us alone. They recognize that boundary, uh, and and they learn from it. And hopefully that they can take that into their own relationships as they grow up as well. Now, the problem is it the love between mom and dad and that focus can spill over and nurture your children. It doesn't work nearly as well in reverse. So if your sole focus is on your children, you actually end up having less to give to your spouse. It's harder to stay connected. It's easier to burn out. So it's easy, but it's so easy to flip the hierarchy on its head, especially when you have young children who need diapers changed, and there's so much that you have to focus on. You're losing sleep. You know, you might be working multiple jobs. It takes a lot of work. And so I get a lot of pushback when I raise this point. There's a ton of pressure to pour everything into our kids, and I think that's understandable. But think about this: how many of your kids, maybe you're there in activities 5 nights a week, and you might feel like you're succeeding as a family, but just reflect for a second. If you are pouring everything into your kids in that way, 5 different activities, everything is about them, how connected do you guys feel as a family unit? C.S. Lewis said that when we put first things first and second things second, we get more out of the second thing than even if we would have made it our number one priority. In fact, a couple hundred years ago, the plural of the word priorities didn't even exist. There was no such thing. Priority means the most important thing. How can you have more than one important thing? Leave it to our American culture to say, oh, well, we've got multiple priorities. So getting your priorities straight and in order is absolutely essential. And this is a time that you guys can focus on that and draw more of that out into your family life. A mom and dad who are in love with each other are much more joyful, much more resilient than a mom and dad who are not connected. And so that loving relationship is possibly the greatest gift you can give to your child. In fact, there's research to support that. Back in 2010, a psychologist named Robert Epstein did a study where he looked at, he did a meta-analysis of all the different studies out there on the best parenting practices. It wasn't a theory-driven thing. It was like love and logic. It was, what are the best things that parents can do to help your children be successful? And he came up with a list of 10 things, and they're all very, what's amazing is they're all very simple. They're hard, but they're simple. They're straightforward things. It's not rocket science. And at the top of the list is love and affection. But if you look a little bit closer at the research, what's fascinating about it is it's not just about mom giving the child affection. It's about growing up in a whole affectionate environment. If you live in an affectionate home, that just provides so much security and grounding for a child. So if you and your spouse are under the roof 24/7 right now, I would encourage you guys to have some heart to hearts about some of this stuff that maybe you just never get time to talk about. Um, if you're going through a hard time with your spouse apart from all of this crisis stuff, I know that's a tough ask. Having an affectionate relationship when maybe you're already super stressed out between the two of you is really hard. I'm hearing from a lot of the couples that I'm working with that the tension that was already between them is just magnified even more. So be it. Now is the time, I think, to dive in and talk about these things. But I'm promising you, it's really worth the effort. So next, I want to talk about family identity. After a healthy attachment system, probably the best thing that you can pass on to your child is a strong sense of family identity. It's right now it's likely that you and your little nuclear family are isolated together. You're not seeing very many other people. Obviously, that's a terrible long-term way of going about life, but it also gives you a chance right now to form a lot of the bonds, focus on a lot of the things that are important, and really have conversations about what your family is all about. But in order to do that, in order to talk about your family identity with your children, you have to articulate it for yourselves. Think about this for a second. When was the last time you talked with your family or your significant other about what your family's values are, what's most important, what's representative of your family? Another countercultural thought that I have about kids, especially when they're younger, is that it's not so much that they go out there and they discover their identity on their own. It's their identity is actually bestowed upon them by mom and dad. Think about this. A little kid they have no idea what they like, they have no idea who they are, they don't know what they're good at. It's getting that they have their identity kind of reflected back to them through mom and dad. And being explicit is in concrete is really important. It's really helpful, especially with younger kids. They're more receptive to that kind of thing. So in my family, we talk about all the time, Langley's work hard. My kids all know that as like a mantra in my family. They also know that Langley's are silly and Langley's have fun. These are things that they explicitly know. Langleys really care about others. They they could write that down in a mission statement if I asked them. Uh, it's important to pass that on. Now, why is teaching your kids values explicitly important? Your kids are going to learn your values regardless of if you explicitly teach them or not. But your value system is your recipe for happiness. So the things that are important to us are important precisely because we believe at some level they're going to make us happy. And every one of us has a recipe, and all of our recipes are imperfect. Some aspects of a recipe lead to happiness and fulfillment, and some of our recipes actually lead to suffering and unnecessary stress. So, for example, in my own life, my marriage is a huge priority. It's really hard to get that wrong. It's hard to make that value. It doesn't really get out of whack too easily. But another one of my values is hard work, and that if I prioritize that value over my marriage, all of a sudden things in my life are out of balance. And so, an exercise I do with couples is I have them reflect on all their personal values. And so, what I'd like people to do is you make a list of every value in your life that you can think of. The longer the list, the better. If you need help with this, you can Google it. Just Google value list, and 100 things are going to come up. And it can range from anything, education to financial security to creativity to fun to faith, family time, building your career. All these things are legitimate values that you could have. And what I would like people to do is identify what your values are and then narrow it down to just five. Again, back to the idea of priorities. It's easy to come up with a list of like 10 different things that seem so important to us, but there's no such thing as giving 110%. We only have 100% of ourselves to give. We only have our 24 hours in a day. We only have the allotment of energy that we have. And so when we try and focus on too many things, we end up losing focus. Um, and we can get distracted. For me, with my high energy and ADHD, it's easy for me to say yes to too many things, to take on too many projects, to say I'm going to do too many things with my kids, and I can kind of spiral out of control and end up getting nothing done. And so for me, I'm not the one who came up with this, but what drives me is if something's not a hell yes, and it's got to be a no. Uh, you got to put boundaries around so many of the different things in our life because, like I said, family life is we're being pulled apart by 100 different forces at any given moment. So once you narrow down your individual top five things, so each spouse should do it. Then what you do is you ask yourself a few different questions. So the questions would be, uh, first of all, like how well do your virtues, or not your virtues, your values line up um, with your spouses? How well are you living out your value system? Um, a big question is, do these values actually lead to happiness? If you feel that you are super stressed out and you're really unhappy, you probably should be taking a closer look at what your values are because they're clearly not working. The next, how are you passing your values on to your children? How is that going? And then specifically with your spouse, having a discussion about what adjustments do you need to make to your values system. This question, if you do it, can change the whole course of your family life. When we're busy, when we're stressed out, we go through life a lot of times on autopilot. The values and things that are important to us are they're just internalized, they're downloaded. We don't take enough time to reflect on, is the things that we say important? Are they working for us? Should they be important? And taking time to course correct really can be just an immense value for your whole family. The next point would be taking time to talk during this time. There's just a million things my wife and I would love to talk about, and it seems like we never get a chance to. And that's saying something because every Saturday night we spend literally about 5 hours talking in the evening, and we still never ever get our list of things done talking about that we want that need to get addressed. Uh, so how much time do you spend talking with your spouse and your children about things that are important? If you're like a lot of couples, you or families, you just end up talking. It's easy. You spend time talking about money, you spend time talking about chores, you spend time talking about household things that need to get done and who needs to take out the trash. And then if there's any time left over, you spend the rest of your day, decompressing with Netflix. Those things are all fine and they all have to get done, but they're not ends in themselves. Money and chores are not the point of life. So why do we spend so much time talking about these things? Money and chores are supposed to make way for us to have the family life that we want. Again, let's not let urgent things like money and taking out the trash distract us from the important things like how do we nurture our connection as a family? How do we nurture our children? When was the last time you guys were sitting down and you took maybe go through your children one by one and say, what does this child need? Where's this child at in life right now? How is he how's he succeeding? How is he struggling? What does he need from us? How can we help support him? Uh, Heck, you can do the exact same thing for yourselves and your whole marriage. So again, putting first things first and second things second is so important. So on to the next point here, which is creating traditions and having fun. So think back to your own childhood. Most likely, the first memories that are going to come back are memories about different traditions that you had. Maybe it was having fun over Christmas, a different tradition that you had, that kind of thing. Traditions are so important because they knit together the past, present, and future. And so they provide this sense of continuity in family life that's really irreplaceable. Most of us have our holidays that we focus on, um, and that's definitely good. Uh, but holidays should also go beyond or traditions should also go beyond the big Christmas and Easter and Hanukkah and all those things, and actually they make their way into your daily life. So, for example, one thing that my kids know is that every single time it uh, rains hard anyway, the boys, we all take off our shirts and we run around outside. Like that's a tradition that my kids know that we do every single time. And that creates a sense of fun and excitement and anticipation. Kids will be watching the clouds. Is it going to rain hard today? It knits together life. And so on my desk, I actually have a series of pictures of different times that we've run around outside like wild men, with our shirts off. The kids, this is important for children because they know it and they can depend on it. So spend some time thinking about, what are your own family's traditions and rituals that you do? What are things that you guys have that you can look forward to? In our busy, busy American culture, this really important aspect of family life it's easy for it to fall off the radar. If you look, if you look in, back before 1970, these little rituals were valued a lot higher in family life than they are today. And since 1970, things have gone kind of crazy. We're all so focused on the activities and the busyness. We're addicted to busyness, and we seem to have lost our way when it comes to family life. More books have been written on parenting since 1970 than in the entire hundreds of years down back to the invention of the printing press. What the heck has happened? Obviously, there's a big market out there for parenting, and there's a lot you can learn about it. But parenting is in our DNA. It's in our bones, and so it's succeeding at it is going to be more about simplifying than it's going to be about um, doing being complex, making things more complicated than it needs to be. Along similar lines, I can't emphasize enough the importance of bringing fun into your family life. So much of life is serious, especially as your kids get older. You probably spend most of your time talking about school and chores and their future and things that they should and should not be doing, how much time do you actually spend talking about fun stuff? If you think about it, every human relationship relies on a balance between positive and negative interactions. So every positive interaction, and it can be as big as going out and spending a day together or as small as a quick hug, every positive interaction is like a deposit in your emotional bank account. And every negative interaction, and it can be as big as a whole an 8 hour long screaming match with each other, or as small as just a little criticism that you maybe give your child. Every one of those is a withdrawal from the bank account. Unfortunately, uh, the withdrawals are worth more than the deposits, and so every deposit is worth every four deposits is worth about one withdrawal. And so a healthy human relationship needs to have a good balance between positive interactions and negative interactions. And so you should be shooting for a 5-to-1 ratio, which I think a lot of parents, especially of adolescents, that's a real struggle. Every time you talk about school with a teenager, that teenager is probably going to count that as a negative interaction. So focusing on building up building the positive interactions is super important. Um, the last thing I really want to talk about here is stress. Um, how many families right now are super stressed out? Think about it. How many families, just in general, forget the coronavirus, are super stressed out all the time? Most families are amped up way more than they need to be. And because with family comes chaos, avoiding all stress isn't, it's not the point. Some stress is fine. Some stress is good and necessary. That's how we grow and become better. But if you're experiencing chronic stress in your family, uh, that can have such a detrimental, like, long-term effect on you guys. If you try to do all the activities, all of the vacations, all of the things, the 100% focus maybe on your children, or 100% focus on not your children, building your career or something like that, you're going to get torn apart and stretched beyond what's healthy. You're better off committing to doing a lot less and really sucking the most out of it possible than you are trying to do everything. We, in our culture, especially with parents, we fall into the three C's, which is criticism, comparison, and competing. You look around, you're out and about, you're talking with your friends, maybe at other parents at school. It's so easy to be like, oh, my kids do this all the time. They'll be at school. Oh, so and so's mom's driving an Escalade now, or so and so's mom wears this to school. It's crazy how intense the competition gets as we parent, and so being aware of that and kind of curbing our own need for affirmation in that, our own competition in that, not living vicariously through our children, really goes a long way to just help us be grounded and help us live life as it's meant to be lived. Uh, so bringing it back to the apocalypse here that seems to be happening in our lives, most of us probably have elevated uh, stress levels at the moment. And this is tough because we have elevated stress levels, which kind of make us want to distance ourselves from other people. But you're probably uh, isolated together with your little family in your home, which obviously can be a recipe for um, a lot of tension and anxiety. There's two problems with this. One is stress is contagious. I'm so grateful that schools have gone to virtual online learning for the moment, because the anxiety that was floating in the schools prior to leaving about the virus was just out of control. My kids weren't sleeping at night. They were so stressed out. If you guys are living in a home where it's 24/7 coronavirus news and that's all you guys are talking about, that stress is just going to be contagious. And so containing your coronavirus discussion, containing your coronavirus media intake is going to be really important. I have limited myself to 5 minutes of Corona news a day, which might sound crazy because I know this is an important time in our life. But if something important happens, someone's going to tell me about it. I don't need to be actively searching the internet for new news. There's nothing I can do about new cases in Spain. And because of that, honestly, I'm a lot less stressed out than a lot of people out there. The other reason why stress is so dangerous all the time, but especially now, is that stress makes us divest ourselves of our relationships. So a study was done at Harvard a few years ago where they studied the study habits of some of their students. And they found that students who focused 100% of their efforts on studying and were very stressed out actually did much poorer in school than the kids who studied hard but tended to study in groups and made time for a social life. Those were the most happy and successful people. And so during this time of stress, uh, fighting the tendency to divest ourselves of relationships and instead invest in our most important relationships is so important. And of course, this goes most importantly inside your family, but is also outside of your family as well. Connect with, give people a call, connect over Zoom. There's a million things that you can do to connect with the people in your life that are really important to you. And so, with that, hopefully you were able to get something out of my little discussion today. And I wish you all the best. And we're gonna get through all of this. So, Sid, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I think we're good to go. All right, thank you, everyone.